what you have been thinking about when what does Gaza bring to your mind?
I think Gaza is a symbol of Western civilization. You know, it is said, there's no evidence of this. It is said that Gandhi, when he first traveled to the UK, a journalist asked him, "What do you think of Western civilization?" And he said, "It's a good idea." And of course, it's not clear if he actually said that or not. But the point is that that is Western civilization. That's what he had experienced, and that is what we are seeing today. But what we're seeing today is more ugly than what happened in India. Because in India, the numbers may have been much greater. In Africa, of course, it was the most horrific of all. And of course, the conquistadors in the Americas, that was the second after Africa. But but Gaza is worse in the sense that it's being done in front of our eyes and it never ends. Never ends. And we see it day and night. And these regimes, these sinister regimes in the West that pretend that they're more civilized than us. You saw the American envoy who went to Lebanon and called the journalists, barbarians and so animalistic. And this is what we are dealing with. We are dealing with genocidal monsters who call the non-Westerners animalistic. This is the dystopian world that they've created. So Gaza is unique in the sense that they're doing it in front of our eyes and they won't stop. And part of the problem, by the way, I'd add to all that you said about Gaza is that they target those who protect aid. They target those who run civil society. They target the police. They target the aid workers. Why? Because they want civil society to break down. They want it to be a madhouse where everyone fends off for themselves. And that's how they also treat the starving people. They take them to these places and then they make them desperate and then they gun them down and take pleasure in gunning them down. And then the Western media will hide it or distort it or lie about it or question whether it actually happened or not. And then, of course, this is how the West works. 40 years later, if they get away with it, and this time they won't, God willing, 40 years later, they'll make documentaries saying, yes, this is what, then they will tell you the truth. After it's finished, that's what the West usually does. They'll make documentaries about India, about, Iran, the coup in Iran. After it's gone and they've achieved their objectives and everything, when they downed the Iranian airline in 1988, they lied. They said that this Iranian airliner, which was leaving from Bandar Abbas and going to Dubai, they said that it had left its corridor, that its transponders were, that it had threatened the American naval ship. They were lying from beginning to end, but Western media simply repeated what they were saying. What they did was they fired two missiles at a plane that was behaving normally. And at the UN Security Council, the US lied. And only years later, did Newsweek come and tell the truth. Years later. That's how the West works. So they'll pretend, that there are checks and balances and that they are, but no, it's only for the history books. But, but in Gaza, what we are seeing is Western civilization. This is Western civilization. These are Western values because the ICJ, the South African complaint, was almost 2 years ago. Back then, the ICJ, which like the ICC is under enormous pressure from the United States, and we've seen how they've sanctioned people. Back then, under pressure, the ICJ said that this could be a genocide. That was over a year and a half ago. Now they've wiped out everything. They've destroyed. No one knows how many people have died. It may be up to 500,000, 400,000 people now, directly and indirectly. The missing, those who died of you're injured, and then 6 months later you die of your injury or due to complications, or cancer patients who can't find their medicine. They all die. or those who have diseases where they need medicine, they all die, but they're not going to be counted among those who were killed because the Israeli snipers were having a game to see how many people they could shoot in the head that day, how many people they could shoot in their sensitive parts, how many kids could they gun down. No, these people died because of a lack of medicine. They die of diseases that could be treated and dealt with medicine, but they don't know, they never have access to them. So this is symbolic of Western civilization. This is Western civilization. This is Australia. This is Canada. This is the United States. Gaza is France. Gaza is the UK. It is Germany. Gaza is the collective West. That is exactly what they are. You know, sometimes people say that we are better than this. This is what. And let me be very blunt. The only entities that stood up against this genocide, ordinary people aside across the world, is the axis of resistance. Iran, Hamas, well, Hamas is Palestine, Islamic Jihad and Hamas, but Iran, Hezbollah, Ansarullah, resistance in Iraq, they're the only ones who stood up. So my question is for those who've been hearing decades of anti-Iranian propaganda from Western media and who've grown up with the demonization of Iran and Arabic media from dictatorships like Qatar and other client regimes of the United States in our part of the world, is that if Iran is so terrible, if Hezbollah is so terrible, if Ansarullah is so terrible, then why is it that the only people who are making sacrifices, they're being sanctioned, they're being demonized, they're being bombed, are these entities and no one else? No other country is sanctioned, no other country is punished. Why is it that the bad guys are the only ones who are standing up against genocide? Maybe people should rethink and come to the conclusion that maybe actually these are the good guys. And that's why they've been hearing decades of propaganda against Iran and the axis of resistance. And I think a lot of people are waking up today. We see this across the world. People see through the propaganda. There are those who are highly, deeply sectarian, and it's a sort of sickness, their sectarianism and their irrational hatred. There are those who are, these leftists who no matter what happens, they're still going in the West, not in the global South. In the West, some of the leftists are hostile towards the axis of resistance because that's just how they grew up and they'll never change. But I think many people are seeing through the propaganda, and they see that the reality is very different from what they've been taught. And there's no doubt that Iran, Hezbollah, Yemen, Ansarullah, they will continue to support the Palestinian people. They have paid a heavy price, but they will see this through, and hopefully we're going to see the end of the Israelis. Some people say that Israel has succeeded so far. I think all I see is failure for the Israeli regime. The Israeli regime is despised across the world today. How do you calculate that into euros or dollars or yuan or any other currency? How do you calculate that? So I'm optimistic about the future, but at the end of the day, the answer is that I see Gaza as a symbol of Western civilization.
That's a tremendously powerful, interesting framing that Gaza represent Western civilization. For those of us who have seen so-called Western civilization as barbaric, it's very transparent immediately, but for others it might be confusing. Just on a departing note, I hosted Moin Rabbani and I asked him this question about how do you see light at the end of the tunnel at a time when there are famines, there are starvations, mass displacement, attempts of ethnic cleansing and genocide? And he said that sometimes it's hard to remember that in 1965, there was very little hope for many people when it came to apartheid in South Africa. And when the ANC was born, as you said, that the Western quote unquote civilization has condemned it as terrorism. But it took only 30 years for apartheid to collapse in South Africa. And you never know, given the tremendous shift in public opinion in the United States itself, part of which is also reflected in the election of Zoran Mamdani in New York, where there is a large segment of Jewish population, and even in Europe, among large sections of public opinion has shifted about Gaza. You never know when this house of card, the colonial castle that is built at the Mediterranean will collapse. We'll leave it there, Professor
Well,
Marandi.
I just
Yes,
want to make
yes,
a small point.
please.
I'm cautious about the mayoral election in New York. We'll have to
Mm-hmm,
see the results, and I'm cautious about him as well.
mm-hmm.
Although the very fact that people have shifted and so many Jews are looking to him, regardless of how he turns out, we have to see because we've had AOC and others before who turned out to be very different from expectations. But it is the public sentiment. When I speak about Western civilization, I'm talking about the ruling class and the elites. For example, what the Australian regime did to distract attention away from the Holocaust in Gaza, it fabricated allegations against Iran. However, look at the Australians who went to the streets for the last couple of weeks. Huge
Huge
numbers.
protests.
These they are reason for optimism. People across the globe are waking up. It doesn't matter, they're Christian, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, people from all walks of life, different classes, different countries, the West, Asia, Africa. We see people waking up. This awakening, I don't know how things will end, but we have to be optimistic when we see so many people making a stand. Many of them obviously will have to make sacrifices. They may lose their job or they may fear that they would lose their job. So all of these are these are all the resistance. It is a global resistance. It is a collective resistance and a popular resistance. And Palestine and the issue of Gaza is the focus of their wrath, but they are looking at something much bigger. They want to live in a different world. They want a world which is just, not a world where some people can be massacred on a daily basis and others can steal their land. This is symbolic of a greater injustice, a global injustice. And we see that people from all walks of life, all races, all religions, that they want this better world. So I think that we have to always believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel. I, of course, as a Shia Muslim, I have no doubt, based on my belief, that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But I think that the events on the ground do indicate that there is reason to be optimistic, and we have to remain optimistic in order to succeed in resisting this oppression. Because hopelessness is exactly what the Zionists and the neocons and the elites want. They want us to be desperate. They want us to have no hope in the future because that basically undermines resistance.